Simplify has a couple of nasty bugs, and I would call these bugs. One is air printing over infill. Let's say this sphere stopped right here, and then there was another sphere or another cylinder or something sitting in the middle, over there in the middle, right here. Okay? Now, what will happen is Simplify will begin drawing a solid layer here because this is the top of the partial sphere. But it won't draw a solid layer there where the object is. Oh, I'm sorry. It'll draw this solid layer, and then it'll draw this as infill. So this solid layer will come out to here, and it'll stop right here and drop the filament right down that hole in the infill. When what it should do is draw a complete solid layer and then draw the new shape on top of it. I was told to use processes. Now the problem is, this one here alone has 9 different locations where I have to create a separate process in order to create a solid layer to keep this thing from air printing. You can see one right here. See, I had to add tape because it wanted to air print that. The software should be smart enough to handle that. That's something that really needs to be fixed. And you can see I have the same one over there. And when I get up to about here, I've got another one. Now I'm correcting this in the file, but something that should be easy enough for the software to fix, this file goes from 21 hours to 56 hours by the time I create the solid layers to fix this flaw and Simplify. So it 2.5 times the print time because of the enhancements I have to add to fix what should be pretty easy to fix. For example, to fix something like this, well, how about this? Let's say that this is the sphere. How about the software recognize, hey, wait a minute, this is pushing in away from the object. So let me start building out below, create an arch to build out. Hold on. So the first problem, let's say I am building a sphere. Okay? Now, if I just print this, that's no problem. Prints are fine. But what happens when I have an indentation in the sphere like this? Okay, as you can see, if the shape was shaped like this, it'd be no problem. Stop messing with me. Because it would begin printing at a intersection point here. And this would begin printing up, and this would continue printing up. So there'd be no problem. As long as the overhang isn't too extreme, you're fine. The problem here is, this here is below the intersection point. So it's actually going to begin printing this in midair. And of course there's nothing below it to hold it up, it just falls. Right now I got to create a separate process to create a solid line. Now, not only should the software recognize that and do it automatically, but there's also no reason to do that. The software should be able to add internal support automatically. So if you have a sphere with an indent like this, the software should be smart enough to begin building a structure here, each layer, so that by the time it gets up to here, there's something there to hold it up and fill it in, and then once it gets to here, no structure is needed. Okay? It should only do this when there is a point that will be printed in midair. Assume 0 infill, because the only way to put enough infill in here to actually support this would be to use 100% infill. Even, 50, 60, 70% infill is still going to have holes in between the infill that this stuff will not be able to grab onto, and you're going to get gaps. And you can see one of those gaps right here. Come on. There it is. See? That's a gap the software should have been smart enough to deal with. Okay? By creating this internal structure underneath of it to support that part. Okay? Now the other problem comes with solid top layers. So let's say I have, I want to take a shape like this. Okay? And I want to build another square on top of it. Okay? And I want to do that. Now, logic says, okay, layer, 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 and then layer, 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 layer to build this other cube on top. Now, this layer here needs to be solid because it has to support this structure on top. Instead, what Simplified does is it makes this a solid piece and treats this as empty space. So this area in here is treated as empty space. So what happens is when it does its infill to create this top surface layer, instead of doing this, it does this. So if I draw that out separately, if we make this the top plane, the infill ends up looking something like this. With the gap here for the square that is going to be built. The problem is, if you have your square top down, and let's say you have your infill. And this is your theoretical top square. When it draws either this or this, it stops it here. Well, do you see the problem? This is the top layer. All of this, all these top layer lines are on top of midair. And it doesn't matter how small I make this infill, all I do is decrease the number of midair prints. It doesn't eliminate them. The software should be smart enough to either make a complete solid layer or recognize where this infill is and draw the layer to the infill. Treat the next available infill wall as a perimeter, so that when it prints over here, it does the same thing. Stops here, goes to this one. When it gets to the mark here, go to this one. When it gets to the mark here, go to this one. Go to the next available point so that the actual layer you're dropping is supported and not floating in midair. The software should do this automatically. This is obvious. In fact, I'm blown away it doesn't do this. This is a really, really big problem. I've had people at Simplified tell me, well, just create multiple processes. And when you create multiple processes, it'll create a solid layer. Well, there's several problems with that. Let's draw this. Square, and then a spiral staircase. Well, that means I got to go into the slicer, find the layer number, calculate and convert that to a height, and create a new process for each and every stinking no good slimy step on that entire staircase. Or I'm going to have holes on all the stairs, wherever the filament ends over an air hole. Now another person says, well, use more infill. That kind of defeats the point of Simplify 3D. The whole point of Simplify 3D is to be simple and more efficient. If I wanted to take something like this and print it with solid infill, do you have any idea how long that would take? Do you have any idea how much filament that would take? It'd probably use more than that entire kilogram roll to print it. And it would probably take 200 or 300 hours to print it. I mean, that's just insane. And it would, I want to make this into a rocket. It'd be stupid heavy. So instead, what I am forced to do is create a whole crap ton of processes. And this is a simple one because I only need to create, what, 9 processes? So I have to come in here, sorry for the delay, it takes a while to process something this big. So you can see here, I decided to up the infill a little bit just because I want to make it a little bit stronger. But that won't help with the drop. So here we go. There's my first one right there. I got to make solid layers there. By the way, this all adds 9 hours. These extra solid layers adds 9 hours to the print. I got to make a solid layer there because that's where this starts. Okay? And that is this kind of an overhang because it's indentation into the interior of the object. Now, you can't design support for in there because it's a solid. And then here you go. So there's my solid layers to begin supporting that. And then the next support layer comes up. And that's another thing you need to add. See these left and right buttons here? Link them to the arrow keys. So I can just tap the arrow keys left and right and hold them for higher speed to cycle through these. That's a feature you really need to add to this. because this clicking, click, 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 is a real pain in the butt. So here's the next solid layer, because this here, just a little bit, 4 layers. It's in air. And as you can see, I actually had to stick a piece of tape in there because it was air printing the beginning of those layers before it attached to the rest of the model. The bed's moving, that's why it's shifting. Okay? I had to do it over there too. I had a piece of tape so I could save this 30-hour print, because I didn't think that was a problem. I guess I just assumed the software was smart enough to handle that. It's not. So I had to create another layer there. And then I had to create more layers at more points. Any place where it's just, it's the software should be smart enough not to print on top of air. It should be smart enough to go, maybe I should put something there that I can print on top of, or alert me and give me an option to fix. So here's another solid layer I had to create, because these begin printing right in the middle of nowhere. And I can increase this support, this infill, to 30-40%, and it still won't be enough to support these things. You would need 90 to 100% infill to support that. Maybe 85% would do it. But again, now we'd be making this thing into a 3-pound ball instead of the half-pound ball it should be. So there's a layer for those, and then there's another gap there for that part there that sticks out. And then there's another one here, right there, for the front wing right there, opening up on the left. I have to create all these layers in order to get this thing to print right. It's kind of crazy. I mean, it should not be this hard. And all you need to do is to make it smart enough to either make a solid layer when it gets an interface like this, or better for these bigger pieces where you don't want that many solid layers because it adds a lot of time. Make sure you draw a solid layer past the point at which the next object builds to the next infill line. So that, for example, in a shape like this, and if this is the infill, and I want to build a square here, then this solid layer out here should go to this. Wherever it's needed, to make sure it actually, these lines, when it starts drawing these lines, that they have a place to go. So here's where you want the line to go, but here's where the line needs to go, because that's where the infill support is, to hold this piece of plastic up so it doesn't just droop down. Because otherwise you end up with nasty drooping holes in air printing. And you end up with holes in your print. Okay? The other thing you could do, I don't think this would work as well, is to draw a perimeter from the outside here, outside here, outside here, outside here, so that there is an actual perimeter here for this layer to attach to when it draws it. But that would create problems with overlapping layers. The first method I showed is just better. And give the option in the slicer to toggle between go to nearest infill or make full solid layer, because for some prints a solid layer might be better. And then also, when you have indentations in the sphere, make sure there's a way to have the software add support structure inside of the object, to span off an overhang here like this, because that's the sphere. See the sphere? That would be like this or this. Okay? So have it build this support to hold up that part when it builds it. Once it gets to the part, it's fine. The rest will print just fine. Okay? But add that little extra support automatically in the slicer. The slicer should add that.